Well, hello everyone. My name is Ted Hayes and co-founder of Pythia Cyber. And today I'm joined by Brendan Hemingway.
Hi, I'm Brendan Hemingway, also a co-founder of Pythia Cyber. And today, Ted is going to ask me a question we get asked with disappointing frequency.
So when people think of cybersecurity, they tend to think of rules and regulations and processes, things that must be complied with. And it seems that a lot of times you end up with an audit. So what is an audit and how does it contribute to cybersecurity?
Sigh. So, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to talk about two different things. First of all, what is an audit supposed to be? An audit is supposed to be uh, a management tool for making sure that everything is working the way you expect. And the analogy I use from healthcare is an audit should be an annual physical, not an ER visit. But alas, a lot of times audits, especially outside audits, are actually exercises in assigning blame after something's gone wrong. And so the disappointing number of people have said to us, oh, good, we need cybersecurity because we need to be able to survive an outside audit.
Hmm. So you mentioned it should be more like an annual physical. Is this something then that would happen once a year on a regular schedule? Is it something that happens on a more frequent basis?
Well, the frequency is up to you, though the more you have going on, the more frequently you should do it. Because my tongue-in-cheek response when people say to me, how do I do well in an audit? The answer is practice, practice, baby, practice. But they should be something that is a regular check-in, and you should be doing them to make sure that the things you think are happening are going to happen. Because the fact of the matter is that if there's an incident, you should have an incident response plan and an incident report. And if somebody asks for an audit after an incident, the dreaded outside audit, they usually mean that your incident report was inadequate and they're either looking for reassurance or looking for a head to stick on a pike.
Hmm.
But yes, it should be a regular thing you do as part of your performance review and however often you do them, quarterly, annual, semi-annual. And an audit shouldn't be a huge, hairy deal that throws the company into chaos for months at a time. Otherwise, people won't do them.
I was just about to ask you, how long does it take to complete any one audit?
Well, the good news is if you're properly prepared, it should be pretty quick. Should be, you should be able to turn one around in a week. If you're not properly prepared, then I've seen them drag on and on and on. And, when I say properly prepared, people roll their eyes. So what does that mean? So in the cyber world, it means that for the risk that you're worried about, and either in theory, because you're forward looking and you're doing the right thing and saying this might happen to us, or in practice, because something bad did happen, for every risk that you can imagine, that you think is possible enough to be worth the trouble, you should have a policy. But as I like to tell people, having a policy is great, but nobody cares unless you have a procedure for that policy. And having procedures is great unless you have to prove that people are following the procedure, in which case you need proof. And if you follow the procedure and something still goes wrong, it's great to have a plan for when that happens so that you know what you're doing in the moment. And then you have a regular review to update that policy and the plan. So that's a long way of saying the way you pass an audit is you have all those things in place and someone says, what happened? And you say, here's my incident report. And they say, how did it happen? And you say, well, here's where our procedure fell down and how we're planning on fixing it in the future. And they say, why should I believe this won't happen again? And you say, well, we have a process, an iterative improvement process that we're going through. And so every time something bad happens, we end up a little better than we were before. And I've never seen an auditor who wanted more than to know what happened, why it happened, and why it's not going to happen again.
So this would normally be owned, if you will, or managed by a CISO. Is that reasonably correct?
If you're big enough, ideally, yes. Ideally, the CISO should be the beginning and the end of this process. One of the things we talk about in the past, I mean, I'd quibble a little bit with owned. A CISO ought to ought to own it in the sense that they're the nexus, the central point about which this turns. But it's a big thing in our world, and actually, you could probably talk about that, how you do not want to make this process of preparing or for an audit or going through an audit a single person's responsibility because it takes a village to raise a kid and it takes a company to actually write policy, follow procedure, and then recover and remediate future issues.
So talk to us a little bit about the strategic value a of an audit. Is this something that could be used to improve the functions of the organization, the IT department? Uh, are there do executives get interested in these sorts of things? How does this play out?
So the strategic value of them is the good old fashioned what you get from planning ahead. And the audit should have an experiential component. So it's not just that you have a plan, but that someone's reviewed it or you've tried it. And ideally, what you get is not just strategic, but also tactical, where you try it. But what I've seen the most value come out of is having pre-computed your responses. When something goes wrong, you don't want to run around the organization saying, "Who's the best person to ask this question? Who's the best person to fix this problem? What's the team we're going to need?" You want to have had those conversations before, not least because bursting into someone's office and saying, "Hey, I need you to drop everything that you're doing and come help me," is not a great way to start a process like this. So the strategic value is having some idea of what you're going to do, which is predicated on having some shared idea with other people about what just happened.
Hmm. So this sounds a whole lot like a typical risk management continuity of operations approach to maintaining cybersecurity. Am I thinking of this correctly?
You are, and uh, the beauty of being prepared for it is then the audit makes sense and does what it's supposed to do. Nobody sat down and said, we need a process for hunting scalps when something goes wrong so we can blame people. The audit is supposed to be a part of a larger process. And so that's why we say the question's a little weird when you say, how can I survive an outside audit? You survive an outside audit by having a process in place and following it. And the value of it to the company is not having to try to do that from scratch. And the risk management aspect of it is trying to minimize the pain and suffering, not just for the incident, but in the aftermath, because audits take up a lot of time and energy.
Hmm. So, what can an organization do after it has an audit gone through successfully, regardless of whether or not there's been an incident? How have you seen companies use that audit information to grow their business?
The uh, I think the single biggest benefit to growing your business is a shared understanding among people, amongst your senior management of what the needs are so you can allocate resources more carefully. The big thing we see, and I don't know why people act like cybersecurity isn't the same as every other aspect of human existence. The big thing is there's always more to do than you can do, and there's always more resource requirement than there are resources. And conversations about where we're going to put our effort are excruciating in without the proper context. So the biggest thing I've seen, the biggest benefit I've seen is that when everybody's on the same page and everybody understands what's going on, then life gets a lot simpler. In a lot of ways, for cybersecurity, the audits are sort of our budget process. It's a little painful, it's a little theoretical, but it makes the practical running of the organization just so much easier if you get these questions answered ahead of time.
Hmm. So really, it's not as scary as it sounds. It's more like good management.
Well, yeah, it should. I mean, I can see why it's scary if it's a blame assignment exercise. And I can see why it's scary if you haven't prepared for it. So I have some sympathy for people who work in organizations that don't prepare and then say, we're going to go through a lot of pain get somebody in trouble. That sounds awful. It's counterproductive and it doesn't fix anything. A decent audit should do one of two things. Either confirm your confidence in how things are going, as we say, trust but verify, or alert you to something that needs to be fixed. Those are actually both positive outcomes. You should go into an audit and think, yes, I want to either be sure that I'm okay or know in which ways I'm not. Because the alternative is time consuming, painful, counterproductive, and sometimes filled with really unpleasant surprises.
Hmm. Wow. Well, great. Thanks a lot, Brennan. And I invite anybody watching this video to contact us at pythiacyber.com and pick up on the part of the conversation that makes the most value for you. So we can continue this conversation to learn more about audits, demystify them, and make them something that actually adds value to the organization versus going on a hunting expedition. So
Hmm.
thank you very much.
Thank you.